Hi, thank you for joining the Empowered Relationship Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Jessica Higgins, licensed psychologist and relationship coach. Today's episode is 499, Regulate to Relate, Building Embodied Safety in Love, an interview with Aubrey, Aust. Let's get started in today's episode. Aubrey Aust is a writer and master's candidate at NYU studying relational psychology and philosophy. Her work explores how emotional safety, embodiment, and relational intelligence shape intimacy and trust, drawing from attachment theory, polyvagal theory, and somatic psychology. Aubrey helps individuals and couples understand how to build safety in relationships through both the mind and the body. She is passionate about making complex psychological insights practical, soulful, and deeply human. Aubrey, thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. It's such a pleasure to be here.
Yes, and we were just chatting, and I'm impressed with just how willing you are to be in the space and talk about these very important topics as it relates to polyvagal theory, somatics, intimate relationship, attachment theory. And I know you're studying and doing your thesis, and we're going to be talking a little bit more about relational safety and how that supports a feeling of more secure functioning in intimate relationship. Before we do that and get started, where would you like to start as far as helping people to get to know you, how this became a focus?
Yeah, happy to give a little background on myself. So I'm an educator, I'm a speaker, and as you said, I'm currently completing my master's degree in relational psychology and philosophy at NYU. So my primary areas of focus are relational intelligence and embodied safety. And so the work that I'm doing, it's really at this intersection of theory and lived experience. My academic path actually began in political theory because I was fascinated by these systems of power and desire on a structural level and how that impacted us. But over time, my attention started to turn inward, and I started to ask, how do these same dynamics that we're seeing on this macro scale play out in our most intimate relationships? And how are we navigating connection, rupture, trust, care, and seeing how those played out in my personal life, and wanted to gain the psychological background as to why. So it really comes from an interest in my own life. I feel as though I've experienced moments of profound love and also moments of misattunement or disconnection that left really deep imprints on me. And so I realized that we can know something intellectually, like why we get activated. We can know all the points of secure attachment, right? But that's very different from actually feeling safe in real time with another person. And so that's what really brought me into this work. I wanted to understand not just how we love, but how we're growing in connection and how that manifests physically.
Absolutely. This is absolutely in alignment with all of the things that I think are so relevant. I remember, so I did my dissertation on conscious intimate relationship, and it was a qualitative study looking at the themes of people that were practicing more mindfulness and awareness and bringing more of this emotional intelligence, relational intelligence to the intimate space. And still, while I included the attachment research, obviously this was so many years ago, almost 20 years ago, I feel like the attachment research wasn't as part of the conversation as it is now, and also the polyvagal and how it shows up in the nervous system. And even though I was studying somatic psychology, I still feel like there's this integration in these bodies of knowledge. And all this to say, when I was working with clients, it wasn't until I started incorporating the attachment research that I'm like, this is what's juicing it. The nervous system. Because I have a client who's like, I have been in men's groups. I have been doing individual therapy and been doing coaching with you. And like, he's been doing the work. And when he gets activated, he does a lot of masking for sure. So he lets his intellect ride. But the real time, as you're saying, what is felt in his body, he almost is not attuning to in himself, so he can't put it into practice.
Right.
And just one other point to your description around how this became of interest. It's so funny, even in so I had a separate master's and a separate PhD program, but and my master's studying systems and family therapy. And I'm like,
Mhm.
why don't our politicians like have a family therapist there to help negotiate? Because it's quite profound how these dynamics, these relational dynamics, and what's fueling it,
Right.
how important that is. And when we don't pay attention, it's very difficult to resolve very complex issues or when stakes are really high.
Oh, it's all intertwined, and coming from what are seemingly wildly different worlds and seeing it from this outsider perspective, my mind is blown each and every day. I'm like, why are our politicians not sitting down and meditating before they go in and make these decisions? Because we could all benefit from some nervous system regulation, let's be honest.
Yes, every single person.
Yeah.
And I remember Deb Dana being on this show, and she's the like interpreter of Stephen Porges and
Mhm.
all the work that she does to contribute. And she's like, in any given day, I am dysregulated,
Oh, yeah.
like many times in one day. And so this kind of notion that we're supposed to always be regulated
Doesn't exist.
doesn't exist. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, on the topic of relational safety and what you're describing here and how this may be different than emotional closeness, they're not totally unrelated, but also how do you like to distinguish this?
Yeah, I'm huge on embodied safety. And what does that actually look like? What does that actually feel like? And so, as you said, we when we think about closeness, of course, there's that emotional component to it or an intellectual component to it. Does this person get me? Do we understand each other? Do we communicate well? All fundamental pillars, right? But truthfully, relational safety begins in the body. And so I'm really curious about that origin point. What does that mean and how do we build that? And so it's that internal, often unconscious sense of, I can breathe around you. I feel safe here. I feel comfortable in this connection. And this is where polyvagal theory becomes so helpful because, Stephen Porges teaches us that our nervous system, we are constantly scanning for those cues of safety or those cues of danger. And the process is called neuroception. We're picking up on things like tone of voice, facial expression, breathing patterns, even the timing of responses before we have even had time to think about it.
Yeah.
So we might not have even logically parsed out what this means, but we can feel it in our bodies in every single conversation. And so even if someone says the right things, your body might still feel uneasy in a moment. And the opposite can be true too. So someone's presence or a grounded gaze or a gentle voice might be soothing, even if it's a difficult conversation. So of course that emotional intimacy, it matters, but these subtle embodied cues, they're telling our nervous system if it's safe to be here, is it safe to soften? Can I be vulnerable? And that embodied feeling is the foundation of everything: trust, intimacy, even eroticism in our erotic relationships.
Yes. And this does take, Aubrey, and my understanding, an individual connection to mind body. That if we're operating, as you mentioned, a lot through the intellect, or we are driving hard or grinding or hustling, as you were saying before we started talking, it has the propensity to pull us out of the present felt experience, embodied state. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's, social baseline theory teaches us that we regulate based on the people surrounding us. We are social creatures. And so it's about recognizing those relational ecosystems we're creating and figuring out how we want to build that co regulation in our lives.
Yes. And in addition to what you're describing around neuroception, one of the things that I loved in studying Susan Johnson's work and the research of EFT, that so much of our information, as you describe how social we are, is being transmitted through emotionality, which is often expressed in these physical, nonverbal ways. That's why we say a lot of communications up in the upper 80s is nonverbal. And I so appreciate what you're describing. And to wonder with you, this is for people listening, because part of what this invites us to do is I think it's a difficult thing to pay attention to self and the shared space that's being co created real time.
Right.
And so the more that we are in practice of recognizing, okay, where's my breath? Am I breathing up in my chest? Or do my muscles feel tense? Or do I feel relaxed? Or do I feel at ease? Like I could just kick off my shoes and let my guard down, right? Like these type of things really are important indicators. So not only is that a lot to pay attention to and slow down and really have some understanding and inquiry about, the what I find people are challenged with is their relational imprints. So
Yes.
when we partner, it can be very confusing if something feels familiar. And while their system may be activated, if it replicates or mirrors something familiar, they might feel a connection to it, although it may not be the optimal, safe relational space.
100%. And like you said, it's so difficult to one, operate with that level of self awareness, and two, bring that into partnership, right? We have 50 million things we are doing in a given day. I don't have the time or mental space to constantly be checking in and thinking, oh, is my body tense right now? How am I feeling in myself? How am I feeling with this person? But suddenly, those cues build up over time. And oftentimes, we become aware of it when a line or a boundary has already been crossed. And that's where that resentment starts to build. So, how do we tap into this without completely exhausting ourselves in the process? It does start with self awareness at the end of the day. You can't co regulate with someone else unless you know what's happening in your own body. So just start to get curious. You do not have to have the absolute checklist of every single thing that's going on with you. Even the pros, I don't even know who I'm referencing with this, but no one is that self aware or attuned, right? That's like going to the gym and trying to deadlift 300 pounds on your first day. Just start to notice what happens when I start to feel cues of unsafety creeping in.
Mm-hmm.
Do I get tight in my chest? Is my voice speeding up? Do I go quiet? Because our bodies are constantly offering these signals, but we're not taught to listen to them. That's not
Thank you.
something that is taught in the day to day, right? We can, sure, I feel happy, I feel sad. We don't even have really the full emotion, or most of us are not fortunate enough to get that education or the full emotional vocabulary to even begin to express what's coming up within us. So, building that somatic awareness is foundational, step one. And then from there, couples can start to work to attune to each other. And that can be creating a ritual for checking in. That can be learning each other's nervous system cues, which as you start to spend time with someone, you can start to pick up on how someone responds to certain things, how their body looks around you, what their body does in certain situations. And then when you can start to ask, what helps you feel safe when you're overwhelmed? And then start to engage those practices. Like maybe it's something as simple as eye gazing or grounding touch or even just mindfully breathing together. And that can be so incredibly powerful. And it's not an ultimate quick fix, but it's a tool that allows you to stay connected in those moments, especially when things get bumpy, because things will inevitably get bumpy, right? Even within ourselves, no one is regulated 100% of the time. That's not how we function as humans. And so we need to first normalize rupture, knowing that's part of our individual day to day, our relational day to day. Conflict isn't the enemy, and how to stay with each other through that discomfort, because that's where the real relational trust is built.
Absolutely. I'm so glad you said trust because I was just on various layers feeling the importance of earning this trust
Yeah.
or repairing the trust as you talk about rupture. I think even trusting the body. So we may get, I'm recognizing there are many people, and I believe myself, I can raise my hand here too, that I will have received certain body cues and sensations and I overrode it.
Yeah.
And it was later that I was like, I knew I just didn't choose to listen or I didn't want to listen. And really trusting that the body, and this is one of the things that I love about somatic psychology, it bypasses the intellect, the tendency to rationalize, minimize whatever stories we create that can take us on all different journeys away from what is very core.
Yeah.
And so really trusting that relationship. And I think that can get built over time.
Mhm.
And then a second layer here is when people haven't, as you talk about co-regulation and what opportunities we have, if people haven't had a trusting environment where co-regulation was offered in early life, this perhaps doesn't feel safe to co-regulate, right? Do
Exactly.
you want to talk about that?
For sure. Yeah. Protective patterning is something that
It's
so many
thing.
of us
Yes.
have inherited, right? Myself very much included. That's how I got into this work
Yeah.
because so many of us have learned to stay safe in ways that might no longer serve us. And this can show up as a lot of things. It can be hyper independence, it can be over functioning, it can be shutting down, avoiding conflict, or constant people pleasing. Hi, I'm guilty of it right here, right? This is
Yep,
a
me
pattern I'm
too.
trying to break. And these patterns, they were adaptive at one point in time. They probably worked. They might have worked very well for you up until a certain point when you realize, wait a second, this isn't helping me. And as this builds up, it can get in the way of authentic intimacy. But because they're so familiar, they can be so hard to recognize.
Mhm.
And so it's protective patterning in combination with the fear of vulnerability, which is so real and so incredibly valid.
Yes.
Because building that relational safety means showing your vulnerabilities. It means naming your needs. It means admitting when you're scared and letting someone see those kind of messy or uncertain parts that societally a lot of us are taught to hide.
Mhm.
And that level of exposure can feel terrifying, especially if you've been hurt before in relationship.
Yes.
And so then, that can lead to misattunement, even in the most loving relationships. We're going to miss each other sometimes, right? We're not mind readers. But ultimately, this obstacle, it's rarely a lack of love within couples. It's the inability to trust love and that connection. And so this work that we are helping people do is helping that process of rebuild and learning how to break down that protective patterning to get into a practice of love that serves both others and ourselves.
Thank you for naming how these protective, maybe even coping mechanisms, for maybe some people would have that language, help us function. And they have been adaptive and served us well. And we honor them. And also recognizing there's more opportunity to have a different experience.
Yeah.
And that part of that path is acknowledging, oh, I am protesting. I'm getting into wanting to relitigate
Right.
what happened in hopes that my partner will be able to decode that and understand what my deeper need is or my fear is. And I know when I have done this work, you mentioned terrifying. I mean, I can remember feeling like I am literally going to jump off a cliff, like the sensation. I don't know if there's a net to catch me. I am interested enough to take the risk, but I'm saying the very thing I don't want to say to the vulnerability, like the thing that feels unlovable, the thing that feels unattractive. And it is those times that I was able to feel my significant other respond to me because of that clear vulnerability and signal. And when we talk about co-regulation, I'm wondering what you would say here. Because as we talk about how to co-regulate when we haven't had consistent, trusting experiences around that, that perhaps what we're describing or you're sharing here around recognizing the coping tendency, the vulnerability that lies underneath, it's not until we access that that perhaps our physical sensation can then become a little bit more on board to tell us what would be helpful, what would we need, and to be listening around, would you hold me? Or would you just sit side by side with me? Or can you tell me a little bit around how do we start to access the co-regulation when the path has not been safe or trustworthy?
Absolutely. I think first, something that I want to point out is that if someone feels this way, you are not alone.
Yeah.
This is the experience that so many people have because we have built up a certain way in which we have found it is quote unquote safe to relate to others that often involves a minimization of our own needs, of our bodily sensations, of what we internally know to be our capital T truth, is how I frame it, but has been repressed by either societal scripts or how we've been expected to show up. So, first, recognizing that, yes, this experience, when you're first kind of awakening to it, it can feel incredibly isolating. And I want to hold a lot of space and compassion for that and let people know it is so okay to feel that. And also that by getting curious about that and exploring this, you are taking the steps to take back your own control and agency in this situation. And it's not an easy journey, right? But it is one that is so worth it because it's working on building relational intelligence. And it's something that we all need to do because this ain't in the school curriculum.
No.
It's really not. And so when it feels unsafe to explore those things, it's gaining the relational intelligence within ourself and in our connections, learning that this is something we build. This is self-awareness, this is nervous system regulation, attunement at a pace that feels slow and steady, something that works with your nervous system wherever you are at. You do not have to launch into giving up your deepest, darkest secrets straight off the bat, right? Move at a pace that feels comfortable to you. And it's putting in this work and just showing up consistently each and every day that leads us to the path of co-regulation. And trust me, there is no graduating from this program. This is left.
Yes.
I feel like, especially, in the self-help or personal development spaces, you so often see these gurus and incredible leaders in the field, and not to diminish their teachings or findings or anything by any means, but there's no like champion. You don't get a prize.
Yes.
This is a lifelong quest that we are all on and learning so much about ourselves in the process. And so it's that willingness just to show up. If you are there, if you are listening to this podcast, you're doing the work, right? And it's taking those baby steps. And first of all, congratulate yourself on that because that's something that deserves recognition and praise.
Yeah. Thank you, Aubrey. And I'm just appreciating a little bit of a meta comment here. Your tone of voice and your pacing, even when we hopped on the call, I was a little rushed to get to our appointment time. Made it, but was a little rushed. And your slow, soothing pace, I can feel my response when you're talking in a very soothing, calming voice. So I mean, I think you're demonstrating some of what you're describing here, and it can be really, really helpful. I mean, think about it. If we've ever been in a situation and things are escalating in an interaction with someone and someone intentionally slows down, and perhaps I think the word in polyvagal is prosody. So this more melodic, there's a bit of warmth, and some people would even say sing song. It doesn't quite have to be that, but that there's in that tone and what's being expressed, that somehow that, I mean, to Gottman's language, that could even be a bid right there, right? That like I am intentionally trying to focus on we love each other, we want to understand each other, and I care about you. And there's a physical conveying of that I think can start to transmit a different signal.
Yeah. And thank you for saying all of that. And I feel the same way. Our conversation, you instantly helped me feel so at ease. And it's because we are giving each other the signals that we are safe in this conversation. So thank you for creating the space.
Yes. And thank you. And you're welcome. And as you talk about just normalizing this and how the curiosity is such a key component, one of the things that strikes me in modern living that I'll speak for myself, I have to override my cues. If I'm tired and I didn't sleep well, my husband just had a deviated septum nose repair surgery and we're under anesthesia, and it's about a week and a half out, but still sleep has been disrupted. I don't feel professionally comfortable canceling my meetings for a week, right? I mean, I could, but that's not necessarily what is an integrity for me. So I think modern living, sometimes we are overriding cues, and to be conscious about that and making choice about that and how to say it's not like, oh, getting sleep never matters. It's like,
Right.
oh, when I can, how do I rest? How do I make a point to get to bed early? These type of things. But just to note that in modern life, I think we often are making choices to override some of the body's needs. And I don't know a way around it currently as far as functioning in modern life. And yet this is something that we're up against. And do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, 100%. And because it's, especially in Western culture, you and I are
Yes,
both based in the US.
correct.
Hustle culture is central, and we often don't take enough time to slow down and listen to our bodies. But outside of the flaws of American capitalism, it's, oftentimes life, period, gets in the way. And in relationships, sometimes we do have to put our own needs on pause to take care of others.
Mm.
If that's a consistent, repeated pattern, that's something we need to look into, maybe make some changes, right? But it's also about that give and take in
Yes.
relationship
Yes.
and holding that complexity because it's not up there. Relationships are rarely black and white, let's be honest. It's making space for all of the nuance and the life that comes up in our day to day and balancing our own personal needs with the realities of being in relationship. And what does that mean? And I loved what you said about doing so consciously
Mm.
because sometimes there will be times where we're saying, "Oh, I need to kind of suppress this need to conk out on the couch and take a 3-hour nap," right? Got to get stuff done. We need to take care of someone. I need to show up in this way and realizing, okay, maybe I can take some time for some self-care later tonight. How am I going to get my needs met? By whom? When? And being intentional about that when we can, while still holding a container for the flexibilities that come in the day to day.
Yes. Thank you. And I love that you acknowledge that life is not static
Yeah.
and that while we may feel this sense of quote unquote balance, I say that because balance is such a like proverbial thing. Like I don't
Yes.
think that it's ever an achievable state to your
Right.
point about like getting to this arrival point
I
that
agree.
we're going to be tested. We're going to have challenge. We're going to have ways in which we are accessing other layers inside ourselves and things get activated and or we're under resourced, and so we may regress and feel some things that we felt like we already had a kind of orientation around. So that's just part of the reality, and I love that you're normalizing. The other thing I want to comment on here is the when we talk about curiosity, and I would love to hear your point on this. As I mentioned, I judged the vulnerability as shameful or unlovable. And when you talk about being interested in the body sensation or the emotional experience, I think it is a really common thing to have labels for it, or especially when we've gotten feedback. So even yesterday in session, I have this lovely couple and they are such amazing humans and have parented, I think, in really optimal ways. And one of their children is, I don't think has ever been really officially tested or diagnosed, but I think is in the neurodivergent spectrum. And they're in a place of estrangement, and the dad was talking about his whole life has been hateful. And I mean he's coming from a place of frustration because this his adult child has done some things that have felt really hurtful. And I was like, could we possibly just hold that there is a way in which he was experiencing his reality and didn't have a way to either process or orient, and the intensity level that it looked like hate, but it could have been just an intensity. And last thing I'll say here is, like it didn't start with you. Or do you remember Wallen's book about the intergenerational trauma?
Yes.
And he
Yes,
talks
yes, yes.
about I mean, he's got some very severe examples of people that are demonstrating intense psychological experiences and symptoms. And what I loved about is like the invitation to get curious. And actually, while we may label that as ugly or something, that underneath, it's like, wow, this does make sense.
Yeah.
And there is really important material to work with for healing and repair. Do you want to comment on that?
Yes, I love that. I really encourage people and couples to sit with those, I'm using my air quotes again, quote unquote, ugly emotions,
Yeah.
the stuff we don't want to face. And yes, it's important to sit with our feelings, feel the feelings, right? But aside from that, what is coming up from that in terms of needs, desires, and what's underlying there?
Hmm.
Because that's a cue for clarity, especially when I've been studying a lot about resentment and what people think of when they think they're entitled to something in a relationship, and the difference between expectations and entitlement. And so when you have an expectation, I want this, so I should have it. Well, if you have an expectation in a relationship, does that automatically make it entitlement? Because I want something, the other person should give it to me. When they can't, resentment builds. And so that resentment doesn't feel good, right? We don't like sitting with that. We want to push it away. But what is that telling us about our deeper needs,
Hmm.
our desires? What's in alignment in the relationship? What's not? And that can be such a good cue to tap into the deeper desire. And most often, it's wanting closeness, it's wanting connection. And
Hmm.
something is coming up that's getting in the way of that. And so, sitting with the ugly stuff, it's not fun. I'm not going to lie to you. It is such great data once we learn to wade through that and see what's the underlying need there, or what's that really revealing about how we're experiencing this situation and what can we learn from it.
I love that. I so agree with you that the interest of how, like, if I got the thing that I wanted, what would that allow me to feel?
Yes.
Getting a deeper understanding around what's the core need or attachment longing. I mean, in my experience, it's so liberating because if I have to work so hard to persuade or plead my case or build the evidence to support my argument or whatever it is to uh, negotiate, that just feels so much more liberating to get in touch with real clear need. And really, when I've done that, it's not even so hinged on the other person. I'm like, oh, okay, like this is a need. And I would love to have an agreement with you if you're interested in showing up. And also, there are things I can do to give myself what I'm needing. You're get going. Tell me.
I'm laughing because I recently got so in deep. This was me at fault in a discussion with a partner on how I was so in my head about something, and this situation. I'm like, I don't see the way out of it. I feel so blocked, yada yada yada. And we went on this like hour-long walk, and by the end, it came to me, wait a second, I'm really just desiring closeness with you. Can we spend some more quality time together? What would that look like? And realizing I could have just shortened that entire thing to about 3 sentences. Don't get me wrong, that was an important emotional journey for me to go through. But it's so funny even seeing this in myself because
Yes.
I can so easily counsel someone else through it or
Yeah.
speak to it at the theoretical level. And then in practice, still seeing these things come up. It's the human experience, right? It's how we are living it each and every day. And recognizing those underlying needs, it does require tapping into ourselves first.
Well, and I think this is what we're up against. And
Mm.
I feel like there's a lot of people who can relate to what you described. I can. And that it's not fully conscious. That as we're talking about nervous dysregulation or
Mm.
activation, our nervous system in nanoseconds is feeling and responding to threats.
Yes.
And to the point about protection and the need for protection for safety, and also the point about vulnerability, we're not as humans walking around. That's not how we're wired.
No.
We're not walking around with our belly exposed and here's my vulnerable part. And let me clearly indicate and have that fully accessible. We actually have to work, and I would love your thoughts on this since this is something you're actively studying
Mhm.
around how the nervous system, I feel like, is often the main driver when things are off track or there's tension, and that we can't bypass that.
Yes. And it's there for a reason, right?
Yes.
It's
Yes.
there to protect us. And so it's that fine line of recognizing patterns, things that have been ingrained, seeing if those are serving us, and then basing our reactions off of that. That's not simple work to unwire patterns that might have been there for years and years and years.
Yes.
And so those cues, when things come up somatically, listen to them. Ask and get curious about what your body is telling you in those situations. And it starts with that conscious awareness of how am I coming into this space? What is my underlying need here when we feel the ugly stuff coming up? And then acting from that point of awareness to be able to navigate conversations with greater clarity. Like the personal example I just gave, I was dysregulated going into that conversation. I had a day, I was bringing all of my personal drama into that and projecting that onto someone else. And as we move through life, we are not going to take the time to regulate for every conversation, right?
No.
It would be great, but we all have moments where we lose that grounded center. And those moments are great refreshers where we're able to wake ourselves up from that and say, how can I come back?
Yes.
What am I really craving here? And so realizing to recognize those cues, ask what they're trying to get us to notice, and then moving from that point of awareness is the key to proceeding forward.
Yes. Well, I want to comment on just the wiring also that our brain tends to automate. So, as
Yes.
much as we would love to just coast in our relationships, how lovely that would be, right? And that's not, we're human beings, we're all uniquely having our experiences, and that includes the threat response. And as you said, the rupture repair process and relationship. Uh, and also, can you give people an example? Because you're really giving instruction around what is useful. And also, I'm aware socially, this can feel really awkward
Mhm.
to slow down and say, can you give me a second? Or
Yeah.
like one thing I do is I'll just notice and I'll speak about what I'm doing. So it's kind of that meta, like I talked about earlier, meta thought, or, oh, I noticed that my voice or is raising, or I notice I feel really tight in my body. I want to slow down and just have a second to kind of tune in. But
Yeah.
that's not typically how we
Right.
talk. So can you give people other examples? There's tons, but just for more options.
I love this question because there is not societally space in most of our conversations to say, one moment, please. I need to regulate. Would love that.
Or I
In
need to close
partners.
my eyes and try
Right,
inward.
exactly.
Yeah.
Not going to work when you're giving a presentation in front of 500 people, right? Start small. There are lots of tiny physical cues you can do that no one has any idea that you're doing. Even just pressing your fingers together, ground your feet into the floor, feel your body. That's something you can do on the micro level. No one else has any idea that you're doing. Second thing you can do is situate yourself in the room. See if you can just do a slow scan, left to right with your eyes, ground yourself in the space. And then if you are in a conversation or someone says something that just like throws you off your tracks, you can feel yourself start to get dysregulated. This is kind of a power dynamic thing that I like to do. Turn the attention back onto them.
Mhm.
When you don't have the space or you feel like you don't have the safety to say, hang on, this is, I'm feeling not great in my body right now. I need a minute to regulate. Take a breath and just say very calmly, what do you mean by that? Or ask them a question about the question that turns the spotlight off of you. Don't assume any ill intent on their part, but just bring the spotlight back to them for a second, because that gives you a moment to check in with yourself, calm yourself down internally, and maybe gives you more context around
Yes.
something that you might be spiraling about that doesn't even exist.
Getting more information.
Exactly. Knowledge is power. So, building up that security within yourself, within your environment, and what you know can be natural things to help you do that nervous system calming work that do not require you to take the mindful moments that we would love to have, but often are not afforded in everyday conversation.
No kidding. And you mentioned it, but I want to also emphasize it, just the power of the breath, right?
Yeah.
That doesn't have to be something socially super visible.
Right.
right? Just noticing the breath and doing one's best to deepen the exhale and seeing if there's a little bit more expansion, posture.
Right.
Again, okay, I love all these suggestions. Well, I know we're winding down and we haven't, I know we're talking about relational intelligence, but I would love for you if you want to weave this in around how this connects and how this helps build relational intelligence and supports long-term intimacy.
100%. Relational intelligence is a practice. I feel like everything we're talking about here, it circles back to a lifelong practice. So these skills, no matter where you are in your life journey, when you are working on them, they will serve you for the rest of your life. It's an investment in yourself and all of your relationships, family, partnership, coworkers, anything. We are relational creatures, right? Relational intelligence helps build those relationships. So, when we are navigating connection, when we're navigating conflict and closeness, building relational intelligence allows us to do so in a way that honors both ourselves and the other. And as we've said throughout this conversation, it's not something we're born with. It's not something that we're taught in school. It's something that we build. And so these components of self-awareness, of nervous system regulation, of attunement, these all allow us the ability to repair rupture without collapsing into shame or into blame. And when we hit those lows, so normal. That is what we have been taught to do. That's how we've been taught to feel or internalize this when we experience the rupture that naturally we will all experience relationally. And so this practice, it's can I stay connected with myself while staying connected to the other and holding that complexity.
Mm-hmm.
And it's something that we do over and over and over again. And the practice is in showing up. And it's a skill set that is hopeful because no one is just naturally good at this. It's something we can all learn and develop. And so then this allows relationships to become not just places of comfort, which are fantastic, but also places of growth. And that's so exciting and invigorating. And we can create those conditions both internally and relationally. We are all able to show up as fuller, more honest versions of ourselves.
Yes, thank you. I so agree. And would also just, I'm imagining you would agree that as we are in the practice of this, that we are afforded an experience that is embodied, that we get
Yes.
to reference, that hopefully will feel motivating and encouraging of, yes, please, more of that, please, even if it took a journey to arrive there or cultivate it. And some people do have, I think, optimal environments where they're being modeled real relational intelligence. And also many of us didn't have it, not modeled in our society, weren't taught in school, absolutely to your point. And also there may be moments where a teacher responded to us or a coach showed up for us or a friend responded like that we can call up
Yeah.
and reference and resource that builds to this relational understanding and our kind of attachment system. And the more, I mean, this is what I'm so grateful that the research teaches us, that we are always adding and updating our experiences. Like this is the neuroplasticity of relationships, right? That we get to continue to update what we know and being in real advocacy and agency around it. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Wonderful. Yay. Well, how do people get in touch with you? I love how articulate and you describe these principles so well. What would you like to encourage for people who want to get to know you and your work more?
Absolutely. Yeah. If you'd like to stay in touch, you can follow my work at aubreyaust.com. I'm currently working one on one and with couples if you want to do more nervous system healing work. Or talk about how to explore safety within your personal or intimate relationships. And then also, you can find me on Instagram at Aubrey_Aust.
Nice. And did you say your website? Did I miss that, or you did?
Yes, www.aubreyaust.com.
Okay, awesome. I will make sure to have those links on today's show notes. Is there anything else you want to mention around what they can find? You said the coaching work. Is there any in Instagram?
Find me on the web. I've just started to branch into live events in New York. I host academic salons on topics around love, connection. We just had our most recent one on the topic, what do we owe the people we love, which was a big and juicy discussion. So if you're in the New York area, hop on my mailing list, keep an eye out for upcoming events, and I'd love to see you there.
Wonderful. Great. Well, thank you so much for your time here today with us.
Thank you, Jessica. This was such a pleasure.
I hope you have enjoyed today's interview, again with Aubrey Aust. You can find today's show notes again on drjessicahiggins.com. Click on podcast. You'll find today's episode 499. Thank you so much for listening. I am so honored to be hosting these conversations here on the Empowered Relationship Podcast. Until next time, I hope you take great care.